Shirley Jones and Jack Cassidy once looked like Hollywood perfection. The golden couple with blinding smiles, Broadway lights, and a picture book family. But behind those dazzling photos and television charm was a marriage built on obsession, betrayal, and dangerous games that nearly destroyed them both. For years, Shirley played the devoted wife, hiding the chaos that unfolded once the cameras stopped. Jack's arrogance wasn't charming at home, and his hunger for fame turned into something darker. Affairs with his co-stars, wild parties, and cruel mind games meant to keep her under his control. She forgave him again and again, until one night, she realized love had turned into survival. Now at 92, Shirley Jones is finally telling the story no one thought she'd dare share. The truth about her marriage to Jack Cassidy, the secrets she buried for decades, and why, even after all the pain, she still calls him the love of her life. In the mid-1950s, Hollywood was awash in charm and ambition. Shirley Jones was the pure-voiced ingenue every studio wanted, a Midwestern girl with a disarming smile and a voice that could hush a room. Jack Cassidy was her opposite, brash, magnetic, and impossibly confident, a man who filled every theater seat with swagger. When their paths crossed during a Broadway revival, friends said the chemistry was electric. To audiences they were dazzling, to each other irresistible. Within months they were inseparable. Shirley often said, she fell in love with Jack's energy first. He made her laugh, challenged her, made her feel worldly in a way small-town Pennsylvania never had. Jack, meanwhile, admired her innocence, though even then, it unsettled him. He wanted to be adored, and Shirley's growing fame threatened the stage he believed belonged to him alone. Yet in those early days, it was all light. They performed together, toured together, and when they married in 1956, they seemed untouchable. They were hailed as the new power couple of stage and screen. Youth, beauty, and talent woven into one dream. Their first years were filled with promise. Jack landed roles in hit musicals while Shirley transitioned seamlessly into film. When she starred in Oklahoma and Carousel, the country fell in love with her. Reporters called her America's sweetheart, and photos of the couple holding their newborn son David were printed in glossy magazines. But inside their home, the tension between fame and ego was already flickering. Jack enjoyed being her husband when the spotlight included him. When it didn't, resentment crept in like a shadow he couldn't shake. By the early 60s, their household had become a careful performance. Friends who visited remembered evenings of laughter that could shift, without warning, into arguments that left Shirley in tears. Jack's charisma drew everyone in, and then his temper would send them scattering. He needed admiration like air. When he felt it slipping, he'd boast about affairs that might have been true or might have been invented just to wound her. Still, Shirley believed in redemption. She grew up with faith, discipline, and a belief that love could heal anything. She convinced herself that Jack's volatility was the cost of his brilliance. There were good times, radiant, unforgettable moments that made her stay. He'd surprise her with flowers on set, whisk her away to impromptu dinners, make her feel like the center of the universe. Their connection in public remained magnetic. Directors loved casting them together. For all his faults, Jack made Shirley feel alive. Yet with each new triumph she achieved, he seemed to shrink, his charm curdling into insecurity. The turning point came after Shirley's Oscar win for Elmer Gantry in 1961. That night, she thanked her husband from the stage, radiant, proud, sincere. But Jack's smile in the audience was thin. When they returned home, the applause had barely faded before he accused her of outshining him. What should have been their happiest evening became a night of tension she never forgot. That moment marked the beginning of a pattern that would repeat for years. Her success, his jealousy, her forgiveness, his dissent. Still, Shirley stayed. She told friends that marriage was forever, that Jack was complicated, not cruel. To the outside world, they were still golden. But behind closed doors, She walked on eggshells, constantly smoothing his moods, hiding her tears before the children could see. She didn't yet realize that love, when bound to control, becomes a cage. Even in those glittering years, the truth was already forming. Beneath the laughter, the premieres, and the curtain calls, Shirley sensed the man she loved was at war with himself. She hoped the warmth she offered could quiet the storm inside him. But storms rarely vanish. They only wait for the next strike. As the 60s gained speed, Shirley's star continued to rise. Hollywood adored her wholesome image, that rare blend of purity and strength. She worked tirelessly, one successful film after another, while balancing her growing family. To the public, her life was idyllic, a devoted wife, an Oscar-winning actress, and the mother of 3 boys. But at home, the perfect picture had started to blur. Jack's career had stalled. His voice still filled theaters, but his name was no longer on every marquee. Producers who once fought for his attention were now calling Shirley instead. That imbalance wounded him deeply. His charm, once captivating, began to take on a darker edge. He bragged about his conquests to friends, often in front of Shirley, relishing her discomfort. It wasn't only about lust, it was about power. He needed to remind her, and everyone else, that he could still control the story. Rumors of Jack's affairs became impossible to ignore. There were whispers of flings with chorus girls, singers, even men, tales that swirled around him and fed his reputation as unpredictable and magnetic. Shirley, raised with modesty and faith, couldn't comprehend such cruelty from the man she loved, yet she endured it quietly, convinced that loyalty meant staying. She told herself he was troubled, not evil, that fame could twist anyone. Friends noticed the change in her. The sparkle that once defined her performances dimmed when she wasn't on camera. She began to avoid public events unless she had to appear beside him. Behind the scenes, she managed his outbursts, calmed his rages, and shielded their sons from scenes no child should witness. But the boys sensed it, the tension that filled every dinner, the arguments muffled behind closed doors. Shirley tried everything to keep the peace. She enrolled them both in counseling, hoping it would restore what fame had eroded. Jack went once, then laughed it off, declaring no therapist could understand a man of his genius. That arrogance both fascinated and repelled her. The same confidence that had drawn her to him now felt poisonous. He didn't just want love, he wanted worship. When she began filming The Music Man in 1962, Shirley's absence fueled his paranoia. He accused her of finding someone else, of abandoning him for success. She'd return home from long shoots to find him pacing, demanding affection, then retreating into resentment. His behavior became unpredictable. Grand gestures one moment, vicious words the next. It was emotional whiplash, and she lived inside it daily. Jack's infidelity escalated into a pattern. He flaunted relationships, daring her to react. Once he boasted that he'd spent the night with a well-known singer, smirking as he told her every detail. Shirley said nothing. She refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking her composure. Yet in private, she cried until dawn. She still believed in vows, still clung to the hope that beneath all the cruelty, the man she'd married might resurface. The more she forgave, the more reckless he became. He called himself an artist misunderstood by the world, using brilliance as an excuse for betrayal. And in his own way, he was brilliant, a performer capable of hypnotizing an audience, of switching charm on and off like a light. That duality fascinated Hollywood. To Shirley, it became unbearable. She never knew which Jack would walk through the door. By the late 60s, she'd grown numb. The affair headlines no longer shocked her, they only deepened her quiet humiliation. Still, she refused to leave. She told a friend, "If I walk away, he'll destroy himself." She believed it, and perhaps deep down he did too. The woman America adored, was now trapped inside a love story that had turned to ashes, and yet she couldn't stop caring for the man who caused her pain. But love and loyalty have limits, and Jack Cassidy was about to find Shirley's. By the early 1970s, Shirley Jones was living two separate lives. On television, she became the heart of the Partridge family, America's favorite matriarch, gentle, nurturing, endlessly patient. Off camera, she was holding together a home ruled by volatility. Jack's resentment toward her success had hardened into something crueler, and the gap between the man she married and the man she now lived with grew impossible to ignore. The irony wasn't lost on her. Millions watched her play a devoted mother alongside her real-life stepson, David Cassidy, who had become a teen idol overnight. Audiences adored the family dynamic, unaware that the real father at home seethed with jealousy. Jack couldn't bear that David, his own son, had surpassed him. He dismissed his fame as superficial, mocked the screaming crowds, and drank to quiet the envy that consumed him. Shirley, caught between loyalty to both, tried to mediate. She urged Jack to see David's rise as a reflection of his own talent, but her words only deepened his bitterness. Arguments turned personal, and Jack's charm evaporated behind closed doors. He lashed out, accusing her of favoring her career over him, of turning their home into a stage. The house that once rang with laughter now echoed with silence. Even friends began to retreat. Dinner invitations went unanswered, phone calls unreturned. Those closest to Shirley knew something was wrong, but didn't know how dark it had become. Jack's behavior grew erratic. Grandiose plans one day, self-pity the next. He spent nights out drinking, then returned home at dawn with hollow apologies. She learned not to ask where he'd been. She already knew. Their youngest sons, Sean and Patrick, remembered the tension that lingered in every room. Shirley shielded them as best she could, keeping her voice soft even when her heart was breaking. She told herself that endurance was strength, that love meant staying until there was nothing left to save. But privately, she began to wonder who she was without him. Professionally, she flourished. Personally, she was unraveling. Fame brought her admiration. Home brought her exhaustion. She'd sit alone in her dressing room after long shoot days, staring into the mirror, wondering how much longer she could pretend. She was tired of forgiving, tired of explaining, tired of waiting for the gentle man she once knew to return. Jack sensed the shift. When Shirley finally spoke of separation, he laughed it off, calling her threats dramatic. Yet beneath the arrogance, he felt her slipping away. His control was fading. That realization terrified him. He began to call her incessantly, begging one moment, berating the next. The cycle became unbearable. Their marriage, once a union of passion, had turned into a battlefield of pride and regret. In 1974, Shirley made the decision to leave. She packed her things quietly, taking the boys and moving into her own home. It wasn't a public scandal. She refused to humiliate him, but within Hollywood, whispers spread. The perfect couple was finished. Jack reacted with fury, then despair. He told friends he couldn't live without her. She told them she couldn't live with him. Even in separation, their lives remained intertwined. He'd call unexpectedly, show up uninvited, alternately apologizing and blaming her. Shirley, out of compassion, still answered the phone. She couldn't bring herself to hate him, no matter what he'd done. Yet deep down, she knew it was over. She'd crossed the invisible line between hope and survival. The world never knew how close their story came to complete ruin, how fame, jealousy, and love had fused into something combustible. Shirley's silence during those years wasn't weakness, it was endurance. But she had no idea that the next chapter would bring the tragedy that defined them both forever. Because soon, Jack Cassidy's brilliance and his self-destruction would ignite in the most literal way imaginable. In December of 1976, the phone rang with the kind of call that rewrites a life. Jack Cassidy was dead. The details were devastating, almost cinematic in their tragedy. He'd returned home late from a night of drinking, fallen asleep on his couch, and left a cigarette burning. The fire consumed his apartment before he ever woke. The man who'd lived for drama had died in its cruelest form. Shirley heard the news early that morning. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Jack had survived so many self-inflicted storms that she assumed this was another exaggeration. But when confirmation came, she collapsed. Her relationship with him had ended in heartbreak. But love, real, painful, complicated love, doesn't vanish. It lingers. And that morning it crushed her. For years, Jack's volatility had frightened and frustrated her. Yet when he was gone, all she remembered was the man she had fallen for, the dazzling smile, the booming laugh, the way he once made her feel like the only person in the world. In an instant, the anger evaporated, replaced by something worse, guilt. She wondered if she could have saved him, if her leaving had been the final blow that sent him spiraling. Reporters swarmed the story. Some treated his death like spectacle, replaying his scandals and failures. Shirley refused to speak publicly. She focused on their children instead, holding them through their grief. David, already famous in his own right, was shattered. Sean and Patrick, still young, struggled to understand how a man so full of life could disappear overnight. Shirley stayed strong for them, even as she unraveled inside. In private, she mourned not only the man but the lost possibility, the life they might have had, if he'd chosen peace over chaos. Friends later said she cried for months, not for the marriage they'd shared, but for the dream she once believed in. She replayed their final conversations endlessly, searching for clues she might have missed. That is the cruelty of guilt. It turns love into a question with no answer. Hollywood moved on, but Shirley couldn't. The fire had done more than take Jack's life. It had forced her to confront the truth she'd avoided. She had spent years trying to protect him from himself, believing that love could redeem what was broken. But now she understood that some people can't be saved, not because they don't deserve it, but because they won't let themselves be. For a long time she avoided interviews. When she finally did speak, her words were measured, tender, and unflinchingly honest. She admitted that Jack had been a brilliant man destroyed by ego and addiction. She didn't excuse him, but she refused to vilify him. He was impossible, she said once. But I loved him. It was a confession that only someone who had truly lived through both heaven and hell could make. His death marked the end of their story, but not her healing. Shirley carried that chapter quietly, tucked behind her public grace. She remarried later to Marty Ingalls, who offered the steadiness she had never known. But even then, Jack's shadow remained, a ghost of passion, pain, and unfinished forgiveness. For the rest of her life, Shirley would be asked about him. She never turned away. Instead, she told the truth in fragments, piece by piece, until the guilt softened into memory. Yet, even decades later, one question lingered. Why, after all the chaos, did she still love him? That answer would only come when she was ready to speak freely, without fear, without shame, and without illusion. And at 92, Shirley Jones finally did. At 92, Shirley Jones no longer speaks like a woman guarding her past. She speaks like someone who has outlived it. Her voice, once bright with youth, carries the calm of acceptance, the sound of someone who has finally stopped protecting the wrong parts of her story. After decades of silence, she began sharing pieces of her truth, what it really meant to love Jack Cassidy, what it cost her, and why, even now, she refuses to regret it. In interviews and memoirs, Shirley described her marriage without bitterness. She called Jack brilliant, destructive, and unforgettable. She admitted that his charm had blinded her for years, that she mistook his volatility for passion. He was the most talented man I ever knew, she said, and the most self-destructive. She didn't expose him to shame him, she did it to free herself. The truth wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about release. What she revealed was startling in its honesty. Shirley confessed that her greatest mistake wasn't loving Jack, but believing that love alone could save him. For years, she measured her worth by how much pain she could endure, how many chances she could give. It took a lifetime to understand that forgiveness is not the same as surrender. The woman the world admired for grace and composure had once been quietly breaking. Even now, she refuses to erase the good memories. She still speaks of Jack with affection, remembering the moments when he was kind, playful, and full of life. She said he made her laugh until she cried, made her believe in herself as an artist, and gave her 3 sons who became her greatest joy. Those memories remain untouched by the darkness that followed. To her, love and pain are not opposites. They are intertwined truths of the same story. As she reflects on their life together, Shirley often talks about the lessons that came after the loss. She learned that silence is its own prison, and that telling the truth, even late, is an act of courage. For decades, she let others write the narrative of her marriage, painting her as the patient saint beside a troubled man. Now she admits it was far more complicated. She was strong, but not unbreakable. Devoted, but not blind. She stayed because she believed in redemption, and when it never came, she forgave herself for leaving. In her 90s, Shirley Jones has become something few stars of her era ever managed: transparent. She no longer hides behind the image of America's sweetheart. The woman who once embodied purity and perfection now embraces imperfection as her truth. She has outlived the gossip, the magazines, and the headlines. What remains is wisdom, hard-won and deeply human. Her sons speak of her with awe. David once said that his mother's strength saved their family, even when she didn't realize it. Sean often described her as the emotional anchor of their lives, a woman who endured chaos and still led with love. Shirley calls her sons her redemption. Through them she feels Jack's legacy transformed, not as tragedy, but as a reminder of how fragile brilliance can be. When asked what she would say to Jack now, Shirley's answer was simple: "I hope he's at peace. I loved him once. I love him still, but I finally love myself too." It's the confession her younger self never could have spoken, the one she carried silently for half a century. And that is the truth. Shirley Jones has finally exposed that even the most beautiful love stories can hide unbearable pain, and that surviving them takes more courage than fame ever could. Shirley Jones's life has become more than a Hollywood story. It's a testament to survival, to the quiet power of truth after years of silence. She spent decades defined by grace, motherhood, and moral strength, but beneath that image was a woman who endured heartbreak most could never imagine. And at 92, she finally allowed the world to see her not as a legend but as a human being, flawed, resilient, and free. Her confession about Jack Cassidy wasn't revenge. It was a release. She had carried the weight of his chaos, his brilliance, and his destruction for too long. In exposing the truth, she didn't tarnish his memory. She redeemed her own. What she revealed wasn't just about a man's downfall, but a woman's endurance in an era that demanded silence from wives who suffered. By speaking now, she gave voice to every woman who once believed love required sacrifice at any cost. And in her truth lies a quiet grace. Shirley Jones still honors Jack's memory, not as a perfect husband or a villain, but as a man she once loved and ultimately forgave. Time has softened her pain but sharpened her clarity. She no longer hides from what happened. She tells it as it was: beautiful, destructive, unforgettable. For Shirley, the truth didn't destroy her story. It completed it. For more emotional stories, check out this video.